Well, yeah. Can you guys hear me all right? Jorge, you hear me? Cool? Yeah? Good? Everybody good? I guess it's good. You hear me all right? As good as it's going to get then, I guess. Still my voice in there, so that's got to count for something. All right. About time to get started. I'd like to say good morning to everybody. Remember, everybody get a bulletin and a green sheet for the announcements. We've always got something going on. Don't forget, after services this morning, we've got the last leaders benefit auction lunch. And for those of you who don't know how that works, come see me after class and I'll explain all about it. It's real easy. Just bring a pocket full of money and an appetite. And that's basically all you got to do. Pick out what you want and don't let me get it. And sometimes that's a little harder than you think it might be. All right, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 10 this morning. I'm going to start with the first 15 verses, and we may get farther than that. You just never know about me. Matthew chapter 10, and verse 1 through 15. Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every sickness. And these are the names of the 12. First, Simon, who's called Peter, the rock. Andrew, his brother. James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother. Philip and Bartholomew. Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. It's interesting that we're familiar with several of those names. Some of those names we don't necessarily dwell on that much. Of course, they didn't have as much of a role in writing the New Testament. And he tells them, tells the 12, don't go into the Gentile territory, he said, and don't go into the Samaritan town. Go instead to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, declare publicly that the kingdom of heaven is arriving. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out the demons. The message was free when you got it. Make sure it's free when you give it. Don't take any gold or silver or copper in your belts. No bag for the road, no second cloak, no sandals, no stick. Workers deserve their pay. When you go into a town or village, make careful inquiry of someone who's good and trustworthy, and stay there until you leave. When you go into a house, give a solemn greeting. If the house is trustworthy, let your blessing of peace rest upon it. But if not, let it return to you. If anyone won't welcome you or listen to your message, go out of the house or the town and shake the dust off your feet. I'm telling you the truth. It'll be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. There's a lot wrapped up in that little bit of scripture there, but it feels like a scary situation for the apostles to me. I like to put myself in their position, but it feels like a scary situation. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, about as far as what was going on and what we're talking about. So I know all of us at one point in our lives learned to drive. Some of us learn better than others. Some of us are still learning. But we, as children, going to grandma's house or going to the store or going wherever, never really put much thought into where we were going and how we were getting there because, mom or dad was driving. We didn't need directions. We didn't need to know what the road signs were. We didn't need to know anything except when we got there. Time to get out. If we look at the apostles' story up until this point, that's where they're at, you know. There's a whole lot of difference in sitting in the car and letting somebody else make the decisions and where you're going and what you're doing than it is doing that yourself. So up until this moment, Jesus' disciples have been passengers in the car. He's been doing all the driving. They've been astonished at what they've seen, but he's made all the decisions, handled all the tricky moments, steered them through the towns and villages, taken the criticisms, and come out in front. Now he's telling them, go off and do it themselves. And take much imagination to think of what their response might have been. You want us to do it by ourselves? You want us to go by ourselves? And it's hard to say, but they know what Jesus has been through up until this point. He's going to tell them later that they're going to be through the exact same thing and worse because of whose name they come in. And so Matthew talks about he names the 12 at this time and calls them apostles, the sent out, because Jesus is now sending them out. Now he would send all out. We're all called to go after the resurrection, but at this point he's sending the 12, and the 12 has huge meaning in the Jewish tradition and Jewish community, and they would all recognize that as that number, the 12 tribes, and the heart of what they would believe was going to be happening, was through that work that God would vanquish Israel, restoring Israel. And that would be based on the 12 tribes. But now, there's a little twist in there as far as the 12 goes, because they're not just a sign that God was just restoring Israel. They're going to be part of by the means with which he was doing it. Okay, so at this point, it's not a 12. It's we the 12. And so it becomes more of a personal attribute of, they are the 12. They are the means by which God is visiting upon his people, Israel, his renewing. And so we know from hindsight that this wasn't the only and the definitive request of Jesus, because he said, do not go to the Gentiles. Okay? Do not go into Samaria. Okay? This was a call at this moment in time, at this point in history. It wasn't the call for the world. It was a call for God's chosen. And, we as Christians understand that. We realize that was what's going on. But Jesus, up until this point, we found that Gentiles have been blessed by Jesus. Now, that was of their own. Jesus didn't go looking for Gentiles to heal. He didn't go looking for Gentiles to raise from the dead. He didn't go looking for Gentiles to bless. But he blessed the ones with the faith that came to him. And so Jesus hasn't sought them out. And we find that during his public ministry that he never did seek them out. So, and I thought it interesting because it's not something I ever thought about. As I studied through these lessons, there's all those things, that you never really thought about. You didn't think about that. But one of the things that the writer, the author of this lesson, if he and his followers had started taking their message to the Gentile world at this stage, okay, no self-respecting Jew would have paid them any more attention. Okay? It would have confirmed his enemies' taunts that he was in league with the devil. Think about that. You can call it reputation, you can call it whatever you want, but the Jewish people's understanding of why Jesus was there, the fulfillment of all the things that he was fulfilling, would have been tainted had he went immediately to a people that weren't considered a people by the Jewish nation, a people that weren't considered. You know, they weren't considered at all by the Jewish nation. So we can see where that would have put a wrinkle in the and it does later on in the spreading of the gospel. And it's all explained as we get through the scriptures. But I thought that was interesting that as Jesus presents the 12, that he obviously has a better understanding of why they were not going to the Gentiles or the Samaritans. So Israel's God is indeed the creator God. He loves the whole world and intends to save it all. To call the Gentiles as well. But the way he'll do that is precisely by fulfilling his promises to Israel. Okay? The way that the world will be called will be by Jesus fulfilling his promises, God's promises to God's chosen people at this chosen time. Okay? And it's interesting that we can see in the scriptures that Jesus was ignored. He was mocked. You know, we talked last week that he was laughed at. He was ultimately murdered. And we, had the benefit of hindsight, but Jesus was the fulfillment of everything that the Jewish nation had been looking for, and they failed to see it. Not all of them, but they failed to recognize the fulfillment of all of God's promises in Christ. You can take that as a sign that we, as God's children, and the fulfillment that we look for, and the promises of God that we have in our hearts and souls, we need to be ready. We need to be actively searching, actively aware of God and his work in our lives and the world, so that we don't miss out on the fulfillment of what God has for us. And it's because we have an example here that has happened. That has happened. And we can count we can read the accounts of the reasons why that happened. And so that should be a warning for us to not let it happen to us. And then the scripture's full of that kind of stuff. So now, one of the reasons I would say that Jesus' contemporaries were not willing to accept Jesus. It seems like as you look through scriptures, they were all willing to accept what he did to a certain point. They were all willing to accept the miracles They were all willing to accept the good that Jesus brought to them physically or to their family or, the feeding of the multitudes. Everybody accepted all of that, Those were the good things. Those were the things they were willing to accept because it did something for them, and it offered something to them, and it blessed them. Okay, as you look through the scriptures and you look at it didn't cost the multitudes anything. As far as being blessed with the loaves and fishes, it didn't cost them anything. There was no payment. There was no requirement. There was no even in those large gatherings. There was no change demanded. There was nothing. It was just God blessing His people because they were His people. Okay? Now, this movement, this Christ, this Messiah, this Savior, doesn't necessarily look like what they were looking for. And we've talked about that a couple times. His movement, his ministry doesn't look like what they were looking for. It doesn't look like the ministry at the temple that they've been used to. It doesn't look like the religious leaders in the community. It doesn't look like that. It doesn't feel like that. It's not like that. Okay, so it doesn't look like his contemporaries. It doesn't look like what they're used to. And Jesus told his apostles to send out. He told them, they're not to swagger around and give it out that they're the chosen servants of God and the chosen servants of the coming King, and all of this is coming in the kingdom. They were to be healers, restorers, people who bring hope to others. It sounds a lot like Christ. And not use it to grant status to themselves. Okay, they weren't to use it for their own benefit. They weren't to use it to be put up on a pedestal. They weren't to use it for any kind of monetary gain or status in the society or anything like that. They were to use what Christ and God had given them to do what Christ and God had done. And so it's a far opposite of what they would have been looking for in a king to come and conquer Israel, conquer Rome, push them out, and so they have to be humble. They have to be aware and very. He used the word scrupulous, and I think that's a good word. They had to be very aware of what people thought of them in what they were doing in the community. Okay, they didn't bring any money because they weren't to take any money, and so because that would taint the community's idea of what was going on and who and what was there going on. So they're not on the make. They're not out for money. They don't take cash or provisions with them or carry any kind of bag or anything. They need to expect that those who hear and receive their message are going to feed them. Okay? The level of faith just that was required to take that leap is just because not only do they have to go and do what they've been told, not only do they have to navigate all of that Jesus has navigated for them in the past. Okay. Not only that, they have to put themselves out there in a position of humility and all of those things. Absolutely. Huge amounts of fear. And then it just piled it on when it said, and don't take anything with you. Okay? Don't take any money. Don't take any clothes. Don't take anything extra. You just lock the door and go. And you go. Go ahead, Mark. I was just absolutely, totally dependent on God and His workings in their lives, you can't. We understand, obviously, that there was a measure of the Holy Spirit as far as for the healings and the casting out of the demons and all those kind of things. But yes, go ahead. And not only fulfilled for them, but through them, because if you're going to be sent out on a task, and this is a task, it sounds just like a task, even though you don't get any personal reward from that task, okay, it's still nice to know that it meant something, okay, that your sacrifice meant something. There was a reason for it. There was a purpose behind it, and that it meant something. Because and I don't know what the because is of that, but everybody understands what I'm talking about. Absolutely, and it was, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the commitment that it took. But yes, it was more than total commitment. It was, it is now their lifestyle. Okay, this is not only what they do now, this is who they are now, and you have to know that the importance of what they realize they're doing had to weigh on them as far as, are they doing a good job of it? Are they acting and performing in a way that's in line with what God would have them to do? And so there's that level of it too. The gospel, which is what they carried with them, that was what they had, they carried with them, was free. And it needed to be recognized as free. It needed to be recognized as available, and it needed to be recognized as something that the community needed. Not only that they needed, but they needed to want. Okay? They needed to want what they had to offer, because there's in the instructions from how they were supposed to act and who they were supposed to go to, and you got detailed instructions on that. The responsibility of what they were carrying, this gospel, the precious gospel, had to be overwhelming. It just had to be overwhelming, because this wasn't a take it and leave it kind of a situation. This was a full commitment. And they weren't, and all I could think of was televangelists when I started reading some of this. They weren't suggesting to people that this was a new religious experience that they could have. Okay, this wasn't a new teaching that would help them with the tricky moral issues that they had, that they might face in their lives. It wasn't a self-help or a help situation, which it was. They weren't even offering people the new assurance of God's salvation after their death. Okay? But that, obviously that would come. It was the urgency of what they had to say far outweighs all of those things. And it's that God's kingdom was rushing upon them like an express train, and they had to get ready. It's time to get ready. It has always been time to be ready, and we learned that. And they had not followed along with their commitment to God as God's people. It had always been time to be ready, and they had failed. So this is their call to get ready now. This is their call to get ready, because it's coming, and it's coming faster than you can imagine. It's not something that will come. Okay? It's not something that may come. It's something that is coming now. And so they had to get ready. So if people welcome that message, which we learn in the scriptures, obviously we're here. So at some point, somebody welcomed the message. Well and good. Now, if they didn't, that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother level. Because if they didn't, then they should take action to indicate that they've chosen to stay in the night rather than welcome the new light, the new morning. The fate of Sodom and Gomorrah is on their shoulders, and they would all know what that was. Okay, so it was, it never sounds like an either or. Either you do this or. Okay? It never sounds like that. It sounds more like you have this opportunity. And you're free to accept this opportunity. Okay? You're free to accept these words. Okay? And the blessings that go with it. And God's kingdom and all of the things that you've looked for the entirety of your existence. But you're welcome to not to also. Okay? There was never going to be any fight. There was never going to be any hatred. There was never going to be any discontent. There was never going to be any of that. But there was the knowledge that you remember Sodom and Gomorrah. You remember Sodom and Gomorrah. It's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. And those are the choices that you have. So Jesus is warning in this time frame that those that refuse to see God's new day and prefer to stick with the old ways. Now, think about this a minute. Prefer to stick with the old ways which were leading Israel to ruin. Okay? Now, I differ in opinion on what I say and what you heard. Okay? It's not the old ways that are leading Israel to ruin. It's their failure to follow the old ways in the way that God intended that is leading Israel to ruin. It's their failure to accept the new way that's leading Israel to ruin. I have to accept, that God's plan was right. God's plan was the way it was supposed to be for his people. They just didn't do it the way God said. And so you can do a right plan wrong and not come out with the right, even one piece of information that you believe is right can affect the outcome if that piece of information is wrong. We all know math. Well, I don't know math great. I know how to add and subtract some. But if I was taught that 2 plus 2 is 5, and that's the only math that I was ever taught wrong, okay? That one little piece of information, how much of my math starting from there would be right? It'd be very difficult to have, if I had to use 2 plus 2 in mathematical equation, it would be very difficult for me to have the correct answer at the end because I didn't have the right information from the beginning. I used the information that I had, but it wasn't right. The rest of every other mathematical procedure was correct. I did it right, with the right numbers, in the right order, but still wrong. Okay? And so Matthew has recorded very specific details in what was going on with the apostles, how they were supposed to act, what they were supposed to do. Very specific, and we have to know that that means something. Okay? We have to know that that remains relevant to what we're doing today. Okay? We have very specific instructions, and if we follow them, we'll get to the correct answer. And so we need to be vigilant in our information. We need to be vigilant in looking for what we know is coming. We need to be vigilant in, it talks about in 2 Corinthians, we need to make sure we're in the faith. It's not something that's just automatic. It's something that we need to be aware of. And on the whole flip side of that, we need to be willing to accept different. Not necessarily new. The gospel is pretty much set. The instructions are pretty much set as far as how to get where we're going. Okay? But we need to remember that different isn't always wrong. Okay? So now we also need to remember different isn't always right. Okay? And so as we look at Israel and their rejection of what Christ had to say, it was based on stubbornness, it was based on arrogance, it was based on history, it was based on, we can base it on any number of things, okay? But it wasn't based on misinformation. It wasn't based on the wrong information. They had it all right. They had all the right information, they had all the right tools, they had all the right numbers for the equation. They just didn't use them right, okay? And so, as we apply what Matthew teaches us, we need to allow it to remain relevant. So, now we move on to chapter 10, verses 16. Sheep among wolves. And if you were asking somebody to do something, okay, you would want to encourage them, right? I mean, if you wanted somebody to do something, you would make an effort to encourage that person to, let's read Matthew 10, verse 16 and follow. See here, Jesus continued, I'm sending you out like sheep surrounded by wolves. So be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Watch out for danger from people around you. They'll hand you over to councils. They'll have you flogged in the synagogues. You'll be dragged before governors and kings because of me, as evidence to them and to the nations. But when they hand you over, don't worry about how to speak or what to say. What you have to say will be given to you at that moment. It won't be you speaking, you see. It'll be the Spirit of your Father speaking in you. One brother will betray another to death. Fathers will betray children, and children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You'll be hated by everyone because of my name. But the one who holds out to the end will be delivered. When they persecute you in one town, run off to the next. I'm telling you the truth. You won't have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That doesn't sound like encouragement at all to me. Okay, you have some don't worry, God will be with you stuff in there. But you don't have a lot of, you have a lot of fear. You have a lot of be ready because this is going to happen. Okay? These are the things that are going to happen because of what you say in my name. Okay? And these are not just things that are going to happen. These are the things that are going to happen to you because of this journey that I'm sending you on. And very little encouragement. But we get to know the end of the story. And the apostles lived that prediction. Okay? They lived what Christ said they were going to live. The things happened that Christ said was going to happen. And yet they remained faithful. And we get to use that as an example of how we should behave in times of persecution. Now, I can't say that we have any concept of that kind of persecution. I don't know that we could wrap our mind around that kind of persecution. We don't have experience with it. I guess we've read about some of it that goes on in the world today, but not, it's just hard to imagine. But we have to know that they were committed. They had the faith. They had the, I like to call it intestinal fortitude. They had the intestinal fortitude to not only experience all of those bad things, but they experienced all those bad things without retaliating. That's human nature to retaliate in situations like that. And you never read about any kind of retaliation or anything like that. So up until this point, they've been on this expectation of what Christ is going to do next. You have to watch through the scriptures. You have to see their experience with Christ, their relationship with Christ, and what's going on in his ministry while they're with him. Okay? And we've watched it build as far as the miracles and the stuff that Christ has done up until this point. And so, you would think that there was some excitement or some feeling of being part of something exciting that's happened. Okay? And we've all been in those kind of situations where, this guy talks about being on a roller coaster. If anybody's not been on a roller coaster, I don't know how to explain it to you, but on the big roller coasters, you go up first. You go up, and you're ready. If you're not terrified of that kind of thing, there's still that fear, or you're scared, but it's not fear or whatever. It's excitement, and you just don't know. You just don't know. So you're going up. You're going up, and you're 100 feet up or something like that. Not terribly high, which for some people that's anything above the pew is terribly high. Okay, and the older I get, the worse that high starts going down. That fear of heights is a lot lower than it was when I was younger. I don't know where that came from, but and you tip over the top, and then you start looking down, and now you're a mile up in the sky. Now you're way up there, and the whole bit of excitement, that whole looking forward to the fear, looking forward to that rush, looking forward to the outcome of what's going to happen, is at that peak. And then down you go. Now, that's when the fear kicks in. It's not an excitement of what's going to happen anymore. It's I wonder if we're going to make it through this few minutes in our lives anymore. And so there's a lot of, you're just going straight down, and you know what happens because you get off or whatever. But the disciples, you have to think that they had that feeling, that one, when you drop off the edge, because now they're on their own. Now it's a free fall. Basically, it's a free fall, and the fear and excitement that built up to that is now real. And I think that's what it is. It just becomes very real at that moment. And so, as they go out, as they're sent out, and they start experiencing all those things that Jesus said they're going to experience, things that are hard for us to imagine. We live in even on its surface, a very tolerant society that we live in. You're not going to, people don't get hauled off into court for what they believe. We don't expect to get beaten up because we say Jesus' name out loud, or we try to talk to somebody about Jesus. We don't expect to find ourselves going before the judge on charges of treason. But Jesus' message was truly revolutionary, and like all true revolutionaries, he and his followers were regarded as very dangerous. Okay, think about that. Think about what we know about Christ's message. Think about what we know about Christ and his time spent on earth, his time spent in all those communities. Not one time did I ever get the sense that Jesus was dangerous. Not one time do I ever get the sense that he's inciting any kind of hostility, that he's inciting a riot, or he's inciting any discourse or discord in the community or against anybody. Not one time. So what it would take for somebody to view that as dangerous, okay, is somebody that has something to lose if Jesus wins. Okay? Somebody that has something that it's going to cost them. Okay, this is the moment when Jesus costs them. Go ahead. That's absolutely right. Absolutely. For those of you who didn't hear what Jeff said, we know, they can just see the beginnings of it, but they saw the beginnings of, Christ's ministry is doing away with all they know as far as worshiping God. The Pharisees, the priests, the temple, the Sadducees, all of those things, the sacrifices, the life that they've lived as far as religion is concerned is being put away. Okay? And the new message is not, let's rise up and kick the Romans out and put God on the throne and this will be the kingdom. His new message is serve others. Do what God says to do. Love others. God loves everybody. Okay? God provides for everybody. Okay? And so basically, as we look at Christ's ministry and what it meant to Israel, they have God left in their whole religious system. you know, God is what's left. And so, as we think about that, and you know, just talk about, that would be that would be and became a huge problem. Okay, go ahead, Mark. Right. Yeah. It wasn't going to be an easy deliverance, but that's exactly right. And not only do they have that example, they also have the example of Jonah who ran. You know, these are your two choices. You know, Jonah ran, didn't work well out well for him either. So anyway, that's the end of class. That was the second bell. I made it through the second bell. I can't even imagine that. But, thanks for all your comments, and we'll start. We'll finish up leading up to chapter 10, verse 24, and we'll start on chapter 24. Chapter 10, verse 24. I think the other class is already in chapter 24. We're not moving along very good. You guys got to get better teachers, all I know.